Hi, my name's Jody Green. I'm an extension educator with Nebraska Extension. I'm an urban entomologist located out of Omaha, Nebraska. I have a master's and PhD in entomology from Purdue University, and I am pleased to be with you today for the virtual portion of the Purdue Pest Management Conference. And the title of my talk is How to Solve the Big Problem of Small Flies. So to start off, let's talk about flies. So flies are in the order Diptera. Entomologists will call them true flies, and I will break it down what a fake fly is in a little bit. But the order Diptera, di means two and ptera means wing. So when you put that together, it means two wings. So flies essentially have one pair of wings. So for most insects that have wings, they have two pairs of wings. So dipterans are the only ones that have one pair of wings. The second or hind pair of wings have been reduced to something called halteres. And those are these knob-like structures that act as a way to balance them. And that allows them to fly like they do and perform those acrobatics that they can do as they, fly and land upside down on walls and whatnot. Here is a generic illustration of a fly just to show you the main parts of a fly with, the wings that they possess. You can see that they have these very short knob-like antennae. Sometimes they may look like a bulb with a hair, or they may have a bristly filament. And some flies, like the ones we'll talk about today, have a lot longer antennae, so it can be variable. Their mouth parts of flies, they may be a biting fly, so they may have a sharp, stabby mouth part that can suck up blood. But the ones we're going to talk about today have sponging mouth parts, so they're able to suck up liquid. You can see in this photo here, we've got two bee mimics. These are syrphid flies. They're also called flower flies or hover flies. They have eyes, compound eyes that take up most of their head, and you can sometimes actually determine the sex of the fly based on their eyes. You can see the bottom picture is a male fly, and those giant compound eyes touch in the middle, where the female at the top picture, her eyes don't touch. There's a little space in between there. So that is a little bit of trick with flies, but if you want to know the difference between a bee or a fly, you can look at those wings and also look at those compound eyes, because flies' eyes are giant. A fun fact with these syrphid flies here, they are the adult form of rat-tailed maggots. And if you've ever seen a rat-tailed maggot, you would know that they're pretty interesting species, but you would never actually be able to relate those two. So flies are a very diverse group of insects with more than 110,000 described species of flies in the world. And you can see from, this collage of pictures that they just can look so different. Some of them are bee or wasp mimics. Some are predators, like the robber fly that's right in the middle. The larvae of flies can be parasites. They can be parasitoids, so develop inside the host and kill it. So they can be, natural biocontrol enemies. And they can also be pollinators as adults. And you can see some of them are feeding on plant nectar. There is also this picture here. You can see this is an entomopathic fungi that actually kills the fly. It takes over its body, has like this mind control to make it climb up to a really high point on vegetation, let's say, so that it consumes that fly and allows those spores to, fall down and continue to survive. So there's some really cool things out there about flies, and you'll see a lot of them out in nature. If you look on plants, not all of them are going to be considered pests like the ones we're going to talk about today. So what is not a fly? Well, these are our non-true flies that are not in the order Diptera, but have the word flies or fly in their name. You can see that these have those two pair of wings that I described, and they are in many different orders. But, we know that a butterfly is not a true fly, dragonfly, scorpion fly, owl fly, Dobson fly, etc. And you can actually tell by the way their name is spelled. So when you look at their name, if they're all together in one word, like mayfly, that means it's not a true fly. So when we talk about like horse flies or house flies, there's house, there's a space, and then a fly. And that will show that it is in the true order. That's why we call it a true fly. Another fun fact that you may never use. So if you want to sum up my whole talk, this is it in a slide. I developed this infographic for some, pest management professionals here in Nebraska because I found that they were having a lot of trouble identifying small flies. So they were bringing in a lot of different samples for me to look at, and they were just really confused. So I felt that it was a need to be able to identify a fly, to be able to identify where their habitat was, so that our PMPs could best take care of the problem without having that step of coming to talk to me about it first. And so I came up with this quick ID guide, and it lists the common name, and it also lists then the scientific family name, so that we know which exact type of fly we're considering. But we also know that there are a lot of nicknames or other common names that we may call our pest species, or what your clients may call them. I also wanted to have a side profile of what the fly looks like, because this is how we see them mostly when they're smashed. But using the wing venation is a very good identifying characteristic. So I got some pictures of the wings from some of the samples and put them in very similar scale to try to help PMPs identify the fly by their wing venation. And then that way we could determine that general habitat, because once we know that, then there is a sanitation solution. Because when it comes to small flies and fixing that problem, it really has to do with their microhabitats of their larvae, because we want to break the life cycle. So, there are a variety of small persistent filth flies on this list, and we can identify them by appearance, by habitat, and behavior. So it's really, really good private investigation here. They feed and they fester in microscopic breeding grounds. And so it's often going to be somewhere moist, often decaying organic matter. Sometimes these places are just getting mopped over, or some kind of residue is being pushed into cracks and crevices. So it can be kind of tricky, but the goal is to break that life cycle using IPM. When it comes to flies, we should talk about their life cycle, because it's a little bit different and it's not necessarily well known. Because we need to break that life cycle, we need to learn about that life cycle. So they undergo complete metamorphosis. So very similar to a butterfly, where there's egg, larvae, pupa, and adult. That's the same stages that we have for flies. And the immature fly and the adult fly, they really look different. The immature fly we call maggot is definitely not as mobile. It's definitely not going to be eating or moving around the way an adult fly does. So we really need to find out where these eggs are being laid, and usually it's going to be where the larvae is going to eat. When the larvae mature, they're going to move sometimes to a different area to pupate, and their pupa may look like this, like a little bit of a capsule, but they may move to somewhere drier to pupate, so you may not necessarily see that. But a puparium is a hard capsule, normally from flies. And then the adults, they come out, they're winged, they're highly mobile, so a little bit different. So we need to think about that whole life cycle when we're trying to manage flies. Because the adult fly, when we see them, it's really only a small proportion of that population, because most of the population are going to be in the egg or larvae form. So we're thinking about like a secret place, right? But what is the problem with small filth flies? Well, they are definitely annoying, but they also can be a source of filth, contamination, because they can transfer pathogens on their body mechanically that can have the potential to, pass around and transfer bacteria. And so things like E. coli, Salmonella, and Listeria, they've all been found in laboratory studies to be transmitted by some of these small flies like fruit flies. So it can be a health problem. And we know that they live in these kind of filthy areas. So on their feet and on their body, and, through their activity, they can transfer this filth. So anyway, that's why it's important. And we want to know what we're going to do based on what type of fly it is, the infestation level, and the type of facility. So, if this is a home versus a business, and if this business is like a restaurant, then, that's going to up our game a little bit. It's going to be higher stakes, and it's something that's a little more urgent, even though homeowners, they will freak out too with small flies, especially ones that have been persistent for a really long time. So we want to keep those things in mind, but it's really about identification, which is very, very important. And the reason this is important is because the different flies are going to have a different way of interacting with people. And, a case in point are these two flies in this slide. We've got a mosquito and we've got a non-biting midge. And, they can look very similar. They're both super annoying, but one has the potential to transmit really harmful pathogens. Like the Culex mosquito is, the one that's responsible for being a vector of West Nile virus. So it is going to be a problem, and identification is going to matter, because you cannot get rid of a pest without looking deeper into, what its food source is, what its habitat is, and what we can do to disrupt that so things are less favorable. And we've got different tactics for that. So, not all fruit flies are going to infest fruit. And, sometimes drain flies can infest more than just drains. So we need to look into all of the possibilities. So this was taken out of the 2023 PCT magazine State of the Small Fly Market, and you can see that fruit flies and drain flies are tied for generating the largest percent of surface calls. So it's 37% each, which, together are, 3/4 of the problems when it comes to small flies. And they found that it was the red-eyed and dark-eyed fruit fly. So I'm going to probably show you pictures of mostly the red-eyed fruit fly, but there are dark-eyed fruit flies as well. So we'll go through the usual suspects. We've got 5 basic families of these small flies that are the most pesty. In this, I've got the different pictures here, but I wanted you to keep in mind that these flies may be a symptom of a larger problem. So, you think the fly is the problem, but really it's an indicator of a bigger problem. These are, a small fly in a large ecosystem. So, think about it that way. Their breeding site may not be evident. It's likely a microhabitat because they are so small, somewhere hidden that is not frequently cleaned or is not frequently dry. Each of these families have a specific biology which relates to their specific favored decaying organic matter. So, again, fly family is going to be an indicator that there's some certain type of filth associated with the environment which you find them. So now I'm just going to go a quick overview of each one of our usual suspects or small flies, and then we'll get into a little bit deeper with life cycle and biology. So Start with a fruit fly, what we know is a fruit fly. They're really vinegar flies. So vinegar flies are in the family Drosophilidae. Real fruit flies are in the family Tephrididae. But for our sake, we call them fruit flies because a lot of times they're going to infest fruit. Another name for them is a pomace fly. We call them that too. They are normally recognized by their red eyes, but again, they may have a dark-eyed version. There's also many different species of fruit flies. If you look at their abdomens, they have these dark bands on their brown abdomens. And if you look at their wing venation, they do have cross veins. So they look kind of like a regular fly, but smaller. They're about 1/8 of an inch long. And again, you think of a fruit fly, you think of fermenting fruits and vegetables, and you think of kitchens, you can think of trash, recycle bins, and they're also attracted to light. The next one here, we have a drain fly. We may be really familiar with these because we will see them in restrooms and public restrooms. They're about 1/8 of an inch long. If you look closely, they kind of look like a moth. They've got long antennae and they've got a really robust, furry, hairy body. They are associated with plumbing, kind of bad plumbing. They like the drain slime or biofilm or gelatinous substances that are, have to do with plumbing and pipes. So we often find them on bathroom walls, on the mirror, shower, toilets, bathtub, things like that. Then we've got the fungus gnat. These are probably one of the most annoying to homeowners because oftentimes they're found in homes. They're also about 1/8 of an inch long. They can be a little bit bigger. And then we've also got species that are a lot smaller as well. They may have a smoky gray color. They may be even black. Sometimes you'll see them outside. They have very long legs and they do have these long antennae, which are different than some of our other flies. The larvae like to be, they feed in the upper layer of soil, particularly in potted plants. So you're thinking, when you think of fungus gnats, you're thinking about the fungus in the soil. And the adults, they basically fly anywhere. We will have reports of them like flying into people's faces in every room in the house, flying around food, flying up your nose. Like they are very, very annoying. Next, we've got the phorid fly. The phorid fly may look similar to a fruit fly, but it will always have dark eyes. It has this humpbacked body, and it's got, I think it's got really long legs. But when you look at the wing veins, it doesn't have any cross veins in those wings. They're just very few, and they're pretty parallel. These guys, the larvae will feed in moist decaying organic matter, really gross stuff sometimes. They're also known for being like coffin flies and mausoleum flies. Sometimes they're called scuttle flies or humpback flies. So they have a lot of different names. None of it's, great. The adults will be around drains, plumbing breaks, trash containers, leaks, things like that. So you think about phorid, think about horrid conditions. And then we've got one called the lesser dung fly. These kind of look like house flies, but they're a lot smaller. They're about 1/8 of an inch long, and they indicate a pretty bad situation as well. Decaying organic matter, fungi. The adults are associated with plumbing breaks and leaks, sewage, trash containers. So when you find these, you often find hundreds, if not thousands. So it's usually not a good sign when you see these. And again, we're dealing with some small insects. So I do want to recommend getting a tool to help magnify your specimens. It doesn't need to be an expensive microscope, but you may have a phone that can take good macro photos, but you really want to look at those small fly wings. So thinking about that, you may want to invest in a magnifier. Some of them can be, $10. You can snap that on your phone. You can put it in the office. You can keep one in your car. If you manage the office, get one for the office and have it there and print off that small fly infographic and have it there as a helpful tool. But I definitely recommend having one of these and having a way to like take a picture if you need to ask for, any help identifying. When you do get a sample or an opportunity to get a sample, ask for as many as they can give you, because a lot of times their bodies will be crushed. People are not great at grabbing small flies as samples. So their bodies may be crushed, but you can identify by using those wings. A good tip is to use backlighting. So if you cannot see those wing veins, put some light behind it and have those veins pop out of a white background. So if you've got a wing like this, they may look very similar, but then, looking at the bottom one, those wing veins are very reduced. You can see there's not a lot of veins here. So, that one is going to be the lesser dung fly if you don't have a body to look at, because their bodies are very different. If you've got these two flies or you've got one of these wings and you're looking at parallel veins, you can see it's clear and there's just a few veins. You may see that dagger shape up here with the costa and subcosta. That is going to be a phorid fly. If you've got multiple parallel veins and they're super hairy, that's going to be a drain fly. So, over time, you'll be able to get these known right away, but mostly I think it's just trying to find being able to see these small specimens that may not be in the best shape. And then again, we're going to look at this. You see this is where that Y-shaped vein will be, and that's a fungus gnat. And oftentimes they may be different sizes, but they will have that Y-shaped vein. So where are you going to find these flies? If you go into an account or a house and they're complaining about flying insects, one of the places that is a good place to go and check it out, you may find way more than flies, but, is going to be the windowsill where the sun comes in, and find sweep those up and put those, gently move them into a container that you can look at later and see what's in there. If there is a small fly problem, likely it can be there. In this sample here, it looks like we've got like a mosquito, a fungus gnat, along with some other small flies. But they are attracted to light. These are all I didn't know what they were at first because they were so dried up, but after looking at them under a microscope, we found that these were a heavy fruit fly problem, and I'll show you more a little bit later. But if you can catch or take some of these dried samples and take them back and look at them, that would also be helpful. Sometimes, glue boards will be handy too at catching small flies. You can see the one on the left, that is from an insect light trap. This is the lesser dung fly, and you can see there's a lot of those. And then on the right, those are fungus gnats. A lot of times people or hardware places or nursery stores, they will sell the yellow sticky cards to help trap plants or pests in potted plants. So white flies and plant hoppers and thrips and all that stuff, they're attracted to the yellow sticky card. So, these are all great examples of how you can monitor for flies or what to look for to help with the identification process. And also keep in mind that you may have a variety of these small flies on the same glue board. Not all of them may be significant, but if you're servicing a client or an account and they have nothing, for months, and then you've got an uptick and you've got a bunch of different flies, something may be going on there. So take a closer look. So now we're going to get deeper in more detail for each of these flies, starting again with the fruit fly or vinegar fly. These, how do they get into my house? Well, they probably hitchhiked on you. They could have flown in from outside. They may be brought in from the food that you brought in. These guys readily, and rapidly will breed in these microhabitats. All they need is some like fermenting food products. And this could be fruit, it could be vegetables, it could be pop, any sugary substance. I've seen them in ice cream. I've seen them in all types of decaying organic matter. So, they do not have they're not picky, and they can multiply, rather quickly. So, speaking about their life cycle, the adult vinegar fly can lay up to 500 eggs near a fermenting food source. They hatch practically within a day, and they can develop very quickly and crawl out of the food source to pupate. We'll often find pupae on like dish sponges or washcloths or somewhere close. And, you may be able to bring in some fruit flies. It may be an introduction, but if you've got that favorable habitat, you may have all the life stages, repeating themselves over and over in your house. So, when you do find that first fruit fly, you want to start working to try to get rid of them. And also find out, where they may be coming from. A lot of times they may be coming from outside. There are a lot of people that grow different fruits on, fruit trees outside, whether they are eating it or it's just like a crabapple tree. So these fruits are ripening, they're falling to the ground, and they start rotting. So that is a source of fruit flies outside your home or outside your client's place. And so these can be picked up on the treads of shoes. They could be put in compost, but they can come in if they are outside breeding. Consider where people store their bananas or potatoes or onions, or where they're putting things. You never know what's hidden or been, I guess, buried under something. But thinking about fermenting foods, consider all of the places. It may be kitchens, maybe you put potatoes in the garage or laundry room or whatever, but those are places that you're going to need to look. Consider that sources may not be in your kitchen. They may be in other places. I think about my own home. I am one of those weirdos that have vermicomposting worm bin in my basement. And if I do not cover up my compost or, food scraps with shredded newspaper, I will get flies. Otherwise, I don't even know they're there. But how would anyone know if they were actually like inspecting my house what that is? So, ask around. Sometimes there are small pets. There could be hamsters that feed on apples or carrots, so those things are all potential to be fermenting or rotting at some time that can attract flies. Find out who lives there and who, of all those rooms, if they are being occupied, is someone eating in there, leaving, food residue, trash, and whatnot. Recycled containers is a big one. If you don't wash out your containers or your recyclables, or you're not managing or rinsing out, things that are going to the trash and they're not being taken outside quick enough, then you have the potential to be breeding fruit flies in those areas as well. And if your clients are, restaurants or food service, especially bars, there is going to be ample amount of food source, food. There's going to be alcohol, there's going to be fruits, there's lines with syrup for all the soda machines, there's the ice machine, all of those places. So you want to think about all those places that can have something sweet, that can have something, wet, and then residue, all of those things. So you want to make sure all of those are cleaned, and to prevent over ripening of these items, and appliances as well, making sure those are cleaned. Think about dishwashers and refrigerators, ice makers, etc. To catch the adult fruit flies, it's pretty easy. Sometimes you can put something together like this to find out the population of flies. It can very quickly, catch a lot of flies, but this is not the be all and end all. You can use like any type of small container. I use like a salt and pepper shaker from one of the dollar stores because it's got holes in it already, but you put some apple cider vinegar in there, drop in a couple drips of dish soap to break that surface tension, and then put it out on the counter when, no one's there. And see what happens. You will be surprised that it can attract so many fruit flies. And then you'll know that that's what the problem is. Sometimes I ask people to do this in their homes to find out if that's what it is. If they are not catching fruit flies and they still have flies flying around their face, then it's not a vinegar fly or a fruit fly. It's a different kind of fly, and we have to go in a different direction. Speaking of these fruit fly traps, there are many stores. You may also sell them. These fly off the shelves in the summer. They will use this as a management tool, but really it's supposed to be a monitoring tool or to catch the adults. But you're never going to get rid of your fruit fly trap or fruit fly problem if you do not find the source and get rid of it, right? They're going to continue to breed. So, if you see something like this in one of your clients' homes, then, talk to them about it. And you will be a hero if you can figure out, how to get rid of those fruit flies long term. And speaking of, traps, I had a homeowner bring this to me, and it was a container. She asked for identification. I said, these are fruit fly pupae. Like, where are these? And she's like, oh, I have a whole bunch of these traps all over my house. And I said, well, you're breeding fruit flies. And what this was apple cider vinegar and a piece of banana. And I actually took the banana out and put it in a petri dish. And within like a couple days, I had a bunch of fruit flies. And I told her, yes, I confirm these are fruit flies, and you need to get rid of all those traps and you'll get rid of your fruit fly problem. And she did. And that case was closed, but it was pretty crazy that she was the one that was essentially infesting her house. So moving on, we are going to get to the drain fly. So these are the drain flies, also called moth flies. They also can fly in from outside. I've seen them outside my house. I can see them inside, my house, or, a lot of public restrooms. They hitchhike on deliveries, right? They can breed and feed in the biofilm of, plumbing. So toilet bowls and sinks and drains, water traps, all things like that. There may be a deeper sewage problem, but a lot of times they're going to be in that biofilm. When I think about drain flies, I think about mop water, because it's that kind of dirty, stale, watery smell. So drain flies can lay up to 30 to 100 eggs on that gelatinous film. And it may not even be in plumbing. So this picture here on the right, this is actually from one of a filter from one of those automatic cat water fountains. You put water in it, you plug it in, and the water kind of does this like fountain thing. I don't know. I cat sit, and I've seen one of those, but I always check the filter. I've not seen it. So if you do, if you find these little worm-like things, they're very tiny, and they've got a little siphon at their rear end, this could be a drain fly. I've had people send these to me from their toilet, and I'm like, no, stop sending me things from your toilet. You just need to clean. So they're very dark bodied, those larvae, and they've got that siphoning tube. They take a little bit longer to develop than fruit flies, but their adults also live for about 2 weeks. They are very poor flyers, so you'll often see adults just hanging on the walls, or, hanging onto the mirror, or being around the toilet. They're very close to that source, so close to that restroom or shower or wherever that's infested. But, sometimes you may not even know that that's what it is, because it looks like a tiny little moth. It could look like a little bit like a psyllid, but it is a drain fly. IPM for drain flies is really going to be the cleaning of that affected drain to destroy that biofilm that they're breeding in. So you might need to scrub. You may need, likely need to use a product that is not pouring bleach down the drain. There are foams, there are different insecticides that can be used in coordination with that. But, fixing any contributing plumbing issues is also a big deal, because you're going to want, that's the source. If there is something leaking and something pooling somewhere, some dirty water pooling, you want to get rid of that. So, very important to find that source. I often have people calling, asking, how do I know if these flies are in my drain? Well, if the drain is not in use and you can put tape over top, any flies coming out of it will get stuck to sticky tape. Another thing you can do is put a clear cup over the drain. You can put some petroleum jelly in there to catch the flies, but you do want a clear cup so they can see the light and fly into it. And that would be a good indication that that's where those flies are coming from. So next, we're going to talk about those fungus gnats. These are associated with soil. So, is there potted plants nearby in the home, in the business, in the vicinity, in the office? That's a a really good indicator. If you find out that your fly is a fungus gnat, look for the soil. Could be a bag of soil. It could be, a dirt crawl space, but it has to do with soil. These are most common in the fall and winter because when people have potted plants, they keep watering on a regular basis, but plants are not taking up as much water as they are during the warmer months. So these flies, they'll breed in, soil habitats. They feed on the fungi and algae in that decaying plant matter. As adults, they can be pretty annoying. They will swarm inside around people's faces, noses, while they're eating, while they're watching TV. If your client is saying that they're in every room of the house, even when they're eating, even in the refrigerator, they're not in the refrigerator, but when you're standing there looking inside the refrigerator, they're everywhere. It could be a fungus gnat. If you've got clients that have decaying vegetation, or they're growing mushrooms, or they're, work in a greenhouse, also, great environments for fungus gnats. So the female fungus gnat can lay up to 200 eggs in the soil. Keep in mind there are overlapping generations, so you may have flies for a long time. But the egg, the larvae, and the pupa, they are all going to be in that wet, overwatered soil nearby. They can, as adults, live for 10 days, but again, those overlapping generations make it seem like it never goes away. I added in this bottom picture on the right, that is a fungus gnat migration. If you've ever seen this phenomenon, it is when they all move together and migrate somewhere. It happens outside. I've had clients send me pictures. I've not seen it myself, but personally, this would be fantastic to see and take a video of. If you want to see what this looks like, I know there's like YouTube videos, fungus gnat migration, look that up. Very cool. Anyway, if you go into an account and you see something like this, so this is what I see when I go into my grocery store where I shop. I see all these plants, all these potted plants, and I just think fungus gnats, right? And then, then I've got friends and colleagues that have, this picture on the right. This is her culinary studio. She's got her plants there. But I also see, insecticide killing soap. So she's got insecticidal soap, and then she's got that yellow sticky trap there to catch bugs. And so when you see that in your client's home or business, then ask them what's going on, and you can solve their problem that they are just kind of trying to ignore probably. I didn't know there was as many potted plants inside of restaurants and food establishments until I started looking around. And then I started thinking, like, maybe when they see small flies, they think they're fruit flies and they're doing the wrong types of treatment. So I started taking note of that and trying to bring this up when it came to teaching the health department and whatnot. But several plants can be infested at the same time. It really has to do with that soil. So the solution is really easy, and it's actually just like drying out the soil. So just like stop watering. If you can't help yourself, or if your client can't help themselves and they can't stop watering, there are other options, like using BT, but really drying out the soil is the easiest. You don't have to do anything. Like, that's the treatment. Do nothing. Those yellow sticky traps, can do mass trapping. They can take those flies away. But if you've got conditions like, this middle picture here, where the soil is really wet and it's definitely overwatered, then you're not breaking that life cycle, right? So, that is more used as a monitoring tool to show that you overwater your plants. But if you want a different type of monitor, you can also slice up some potato and put that on the soil, and the fungus gnat larvae will go to that, and you can determine if you have fungus gnats or not. So you don't necessarily need these yellow sticky traps, but again, these are tools, and you can usually purchase those either online or nursery stores, and you may catch things. So these are all different fungus gnats here, and this middle picture is actually a parasitoid wasp and predator of a fungus gnat. So, this client had so many fungus gnats that they actually had natural enemies of the fungus gnats coming. And so I identified that as, a parasitoid wasp. And, it's only 2 millimeters long, and it attacks fungus gnats. Forward flies. So This is a diverse group of flies. They can perform many roles in our ecosystem. So they are scavengers, they are predators, they are parasitoids. But in our case, they are pretty pesty and they indicate a big problem. There is some type of decaying organic material. It could be a dead body buried somewhere. It could be, animal burrows will have phorid flies because of manure and, rotting carcasses, sewer pipes, any nutrient rich soil, trash containers, all of those kind of things. If you've got phorid flies, it's probably a pretty horrid situation. So it's pretty bad. These are also called scuttle flies because they run really quickly in these short bursts and then short pauses. So they can't kind of act a little interesting, little skittish. These are also called coffin flies because they can be a pest in mausoleums and in coffins. So, think about that. That's pretty horrible if you have to deal with that as well. Their life cycle is a little bit longer than the vinegar fly, but you can see this larvae is moving around. This larva is moving around in the middle picture. That's a pupa. And we've got quite a few adult phorid flies on this sticky trap here. And I can tell you this was put by a container at the university that was breeding Madagascar hissing cockroaches for education. But you can see there's something nasty going on and they definitely need to change this cage. So after I identified this as phorid flies, they had to clean out all their cages. The eggs are laid on damp, rotting organic matter. And, same stuff like other small flies. You need to break that life cycle. So finding and getting rid of the source is going to be the problem. If you are still having a hard time trying to identify this fly, but you don't have a wing, maybe you don't have a body, but you have a leg, you can tell that it's a phorid fly by its leg. Get that hind leg, and it is leg day. It is, there's going to be an enlarged hind femur, and it's going to be flattened. And that is another characteristic of a phorid fly. So again, this is why magnification tools are great and necessary. This is just a little fun fact about a different type of phorid fly, because a pest is an organism is a pest based on many different things, and not all phorid flies are bad. This one actually, if you've ever heard of the phorid fly that makes ants' heads pop off, this is it. It's a type of phorid fly, an ant decapitating phorid. So it's a parasitoid of gravid or pregnant female ants. And this is its 15 minutes of fame for being a really cool insect. Anyway, let's press on. So lesser dung fly. The name sounds terrible. Lesser dung, well, it means it's a smaller dung fly, but dung is usually not good, right? So they breed and feed in decaying organic matter, probably manure or dung, could be animal pens, livestock, compost, rotting vegetation. Sounds bad, right? Like broken sewage pipes. That's a really good one as well. So, they may look kind of like a housefly, but they are 3 times smaller than a housefly. So you may have more of them. They have been getting more attention in the last few years, but and they can be found with the phorid fly because that's how bad conditions may be. They have a pretty gross diet, and a lot of times their habitat is going to be somewhere pretty hidden. They can be in commercial and residential kitchens, and they'll reproduce indoors if it's warm. Again, if you look at their leg, what part you're going to look at is one of their foot sections. So we call this a tarsal segment. It's going to be square or blocky. It's right here. So that's going to be what you're going to look at. It's a good characteristic if you don't have like the body or the wings. Again, locating the source is going to be tough because it may not be evident. You may sometimes need to follow your nose because it may smell. There will be some kind of rotten organic matter somewhere, and it actually might be under the concrete slab. It may be under the foundation. It may be under the structure. It may be a plumbing issue. You need to fix it and dry that area out. So In that situation, the flies in the windowsill were the drain flies, fungus gnat, and lesser dung fly. So, that's not a great situation. For months, we had a really bad smell. So yes, this is my house, and we had to, we ignored it for a really long time. And then finally, after I collected the flies, I'm like, yeah, this is a big problem. We have a problem. And when we had the time and the money, we had to pay someone to excavate under the foundation in our basement to find what was the problem. And it was a cracked pipe, a really bad cracked pipe that cost us a lot of money. And I did a lot of work trying to figure out what was happening and, came up with this illustration. But, there are a lot of things that we don't see that can be the source of small fly problems. So in this case, these small flies was an indication of a bigger problem, a very big, expensive problem. So, in no way could that be our PMP's fault. I'm the PMP at my house, but you can't be responsible for getting rid of those flies if there is an underlying problem that you are not responsible for, that you can't get to, that you can't fix, right? In that case, you need contractors and probably engineers and, property managers, all those kind of things. So when you're doing an inspection for small flies, you're going to need several things. It's obviously going to be a little bit of a dirty job. So you're going to want PPE, you're going to want knee pads and a bump cap. Who knows where your nose is going to take you, right? So you need all of those things, but you also need a bright light. I love my headlamp, so I have, hands-free, all the tools to scrape and, find that gelatinous substance if you need to find it. Again, your phone to document, sticky traps, or your magnification tool, and then all the places that you can look for. I've already mentioned a lot of them, but if it's going to be a really difficult, challenging, persistent small fly issue, now that you know what to look for, you can just go into the places, and it's not necessarily just going to be the kitchen or bathroom, right? You're going to look for places where those decaying organic matter may be. And, think about humidity, think about that moisture. It's going to be a lot higher than normal. So fruit fly, vinegar fly, they prefer 70% humidity. So you're going to be looking for something like that. It may not hurt to have a moisture meter or a relative humidity reader and use that. And again, follow your nose. So, there are many treatments for small flies, but it really does take an integrated approach because you do need sanitation. You need to have things clean and you need to have things dry. And that will focus on the eggs, the larvae, the pupa, and, mostly to get rid of that. And you have to do that at the same time that you're taking care of adults. And you could be using, mechanical traps and things like that to trap them, to get them out of the way so they're not breeding and not laying eggs. But you do have to manage that sanitation on the other end for the other life stages. There are many different, chemical products that are very effective, that can offer anything from like quick knockdown to space to biocontrol, residual baits. And it's all going to depend on where that problem is and where you're treating. It's going to be different at a dumpster location outside than it is going to be in a kitchen in a hospital, right? So you're going to have to focus your attention and use all the things in your toolbox that make sense in that situation. And again, sometimes, you're going to have structural issues, which are going to require more than just a PMP, contractors, plumbers, etc. Sanitation, we cannot stress enough when it comes to small flies. There are so many microhabitats. So, really up that sanitation game, that master sanitation schedule during, heavy high times like summer, patio doors, things like that. Those kind of high pressure times, make sure you're not just hosing areas down and pushing debris into harder to reach places, but you're actually cleaning and drying things out. Think about drains, think about equipment that may harbor some of those residue. Think about the lighting, think about, all the debris that could be stuck in places. And, when you think about drain sanitation, think about all the places that there are drains that are not necessarily your floor drain, and maybe not just necessarily in a sink, but like your mops and your water fountains and, condensation pans in appliances. All of these things are places that you need to look if you've got those persistent problems. And there are bioenzymes. There are so many good products out there that are thickened and, just targeted for drains. And so I would urge you to look into some of those to help, fix your clients' problems. We cannot, have these perfect floors that have no seams or grout or tile and mats. Our situations look more like, some of these issues here where the mop water is not being poured out and things are not cleaned up, and we need to write that and document that and help our clients improve their sanitation schedules and managing the environment to decrease those small fly pressure. For adult control, I talked a little bit about those mechanical controls. We have, insect light traps that look very nice these days that you can have in the dining area where there's not food prep. They are great for intercepting flies before they get into the kitchen, since we've got a lot of, open doors and open patios now where it's, we're bringing the outside in or vice versa. The automatic doors help so doors aren't propped open or open for a long time, because screening is really not practical in a lot of places that aren't necessarily, or that aren't residential. So we may want to have air curtains installed. It's a little bit, more, electricity and whatnot, but it really has a good barrier to keep insects, that fly in and out, and you can't see it. So, check the pressure in the building, make sure there's not negative pressure where bugs are being sucked in. That's also a very interesting and very something you're going to want to look at, because that's also something you can't stop, but something you can recommend. So just to review, our small flies, they can be a huge nuisance for the size that they are, right? Because they don't come just like one at a time. They come in many. But it's really important to correctly identify this pest, because everyone wants to call it a fruit fly, right? So you want to identify it so you can figure out where the source of that infestation is and break that life cycle. And so in order to do that, you need regular inspections. And even if you do get rid of the flies for a little bit, you want to make sure you have that monitoring in place. You want to make sure that your clients can come to you and tell you that things have gotten better, or maybe things are not getting better. Be able to keep the records for documentation so you know that this is probably something that's going to happen seasonally. This is going to happen when, again, insects are very cyclical, right? So when they return in bloom, you'll have proactive strategies to combat that. And so, you will help them with their small fly problem now and into the future. And always, make sure to document those recommendations that you have, that you can help educate them and how they can improve sanitation and how they can improve, their small fly program, so that they can not have to deal with it so severely every year, because it does get better when you get better and they get better at taking care of their problems. So thank you so much for listening. Here is a QR code that will take you right to that quick ID guide to small flies. And I recommend, if that's something you like, take it, laminate it, put it by your microscope in your office, or just have it, with you in your vehicle in case you do have to identify a small fly. Hopefully that will help you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, feel free to ask a question, and I look forward to hearing from you very soon. Have a great day.